Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going.
Good?
Yeah, I'm going. So what's up?
Alright, so you're going.
Yeah, I'm going. What's up?
Alright, so you're recording.
I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna come over there and hit you.
What are you gonna hit me with?
I don't know. Whatever's available. Your chair?
You gonna hit me with a kettle of fish? Jeff, I want to open up a whole other kettle of fish.
A whole other kettle of fish. Okay.
Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Jeff, and welcome to the Sound Judgement podcast.
Where every episode, we'll be discussing all of the important musical topics, from reviews to which member of Motley Crue is the most vile.
I'm gonna judge the officials. I'm gonna judge all the judges. It's gonna take you people years to recover from all my opinions.
We missed something when we were talking about year in review, because a band released a song that will surely never release a song again, right?
I would assume there will be no more songs, although that being said, we thought that a while ago when we were proven incorrect. So I think it is safe to assume, yes, that there will be no more.
So let's assume or hope that we can talk real quick about the last Beatles song, as described in Now and Then, the last Beatles song, a documentary about the last Beatles song, which is called Now and Then. Released as a single called Now and Then by the Beatles.
Are you done? So, okay, would you mind explaining what the hell happened here? Do you, explain where this came from and why this even exists?
The song or the podcast?
The song.
Okay.
Why is there a song? Why did the Beatles, who two of their members have been dead for a while, how did they release a new song?
It seems that it all started when one of the voices on the documentary, who I think was Paul, was talking with Yoko Ono.
Yes.
And Yoko said that she had at least one, maybe a couple tapes of Paul just recording demos in their house. And
yes.
The one that she said they thought they might be able to use for something was a song that was called Now and Then. And they listened to it, and it was just Paul, or John.
It's just John.
It's just John recording on a piano and singing. And the band listened to it and decided maybe they could record some of their parts and have one more, quote, true Beatles song.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah.
And that's how it started. And it seems as though they were not able to get the results that they wanted. But now with new technology, they've found that they can clean up the tapes of John even more and make it more presentable.
Yeah, they were able to AI their way through and clean up the recording, which I have to say is funny, because the way, when the song was coming out, the way articles loved to pose this was that AI recreated John Lennon's voice. And it's like, that's really not what happened. It basically just edited it up and cleaned it up some and made it sound like a nice new recording. It didn't recreate his voice in any way. Right? This isn't like that garbage that my YouTube feed is infested with, where it's like, what if Frank Sinatra sang, that shit. It's not a literal recreation of John Lennon's voice. It cleaned up an old recording with technology that they didn't previously have.
Yeah. This isn't AI generated John Lennon. It's AI enhanced John Lennon.
It's AI cleaned.
Yeah. But I thought, as, pioneers in AI music, we should discuss this. Because, as you well know, we are pioneers in AI music, thanks to Puff Was the One.
As I well know, for anyone who may happen to catch this and doesn't know, back in 2020, we used... Do you remember which text program we used? I don't remember, actually.
No, I don't remember which one specifically.
We used one of those early, give it a prompt and it writes text AI generators. And we gave it the prompt of, I think, Loving Cheese Puffs.
A love song about cheese puff. It specifically generated lyrics, and we requested a love song about cheese puffs.
About cheese puffs. And then we used Microsoft Sam, essentially, just like some very generic text-to-speech program to speak the words. And then we used Microsoft Songsmith to make the music. And I took about 30 seconds to edit it all together. And it gave us, as, the first I had ever seen, at least, fully made by AI song. right? It was
Right.
all computer-generated garbage that we just spliced together and called it a day.
Puff was the one who let me kiss his face. Puff was the only one I ever shared a laugh with. You left your keys hanging in the hallway, alone. She lets him in, she knows Puff will never leave. Cause Puff stole them all before. And there's a raven in my soul, telling me to believe. Puff was the one who let me kiss his face. Puff was the only one I ever shared a laugh with.
And it sure is just a beautiful song. I have it on my phone. I listen to it all. I haven't listened to it in years. I don't even really remember what it sounds like.
Jeff,
I
what
know
do you
there's
think?
I know there's one line about a raven in my soul or something.
Jeff, who do you think released a better song? The Beatles with Now and Then, or us with Puff Was the One?
I think we released a more interesting song, to be perfectly honest with you.
I'm gonna agree.
I mean, as a moderate Beatles fan, Now and Then is not an interesting song in any way, shape, or form. It is very, very boring as far as Beatles go, which is fine. They were allowed to just write silly little ballad love songs and whatnot, but it's just not an interesting one.
Right.
We, however, I think did something at least interesting by mixing 3 types of computer programming to make a song that, I mean, isn't good. Like, pretty objectively, it's not a good song. But it's at least doing something that I had never previously heard.
All right, well, let's talk about how we inspired the Beatles.
How we inspired the Beatles.
But yeah, I can agree. It sounds kind of fillery, but I guess that's what you get when you're dealing with a demo that someone, was still
It's all
just
they
working on.
had.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you watched the documentary as well? What
Yeah.
do you think of all this? Do you think this was worth all the time and energy we've all put into it? I think it was worth it just to hear Paul say, listen to George's bass line after George passed away and just go, I could play that better.
I am so glad you pointed that out, because I actually missed that. I think the documentary is significantly more interesting than the song, if that counts. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I genuinely stand by that. I think the documentary is really interesting. I loved every second of, oh god, what was the monstrously long Beatles? I'm sorry, give me a second because I'm drawing a blank on what that insane. What was the thing that was like 70 hours long? The behind the scenes of them.
Oh, Get Back.
Oh my god, thank you. I'm like Chris,
Yeah,
help me.
yeah.
I'm like what the hell?
I just didn't know where you were going with it.
The whole documentary series.
This is kind of like a sub project of that. This came from Get Back. The work in Get Back that was done to enhance the music in that was what led to this being finished.
Well, I think just in general, I mean, because the Beatles were they were such a legendary band, and I think even by some measures, they're still like the most successful band of all time. Again, depending on how you measure it, of course, you can rewrite that however you want to get the answers you want, but still, in some measures, they are still like the most successful band of all time. And I think just watching their process and getting a little insight into behind the scenes kind of thing is just fascinating, especially the difference in how Paul seems to think. Like watching Paul in Get Back, right? He's 20 some years old and he's just like so naturally gifted at what he does, right? Like great songs just like flowed out his fingertips as if it took no effort at all. And a lot of it was just goofy. And then watching how he's like a little more serious now when they were just fixing up this one song. It was just kind of interesting to see how his personality had changed over, again, we're talking like, 60 years here. It was just a really cool insight to specifically Paul. I think he's probably the most interesting personality of the band.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. I don't think too many people think much about George, and Ringo's kind of there, and then you got
even when they were alive,
yeah.
I think Paul was probably the most interesting personality.
Yeah.
In the sense of like he would have made for good television just like existing. Right. His just front-facing personality was just just so much more entertaining, and he was just a little more out there. Whereas, like, George was more reserved, and
the only one in the band that also really, I think, had, like, personality was Lennon, and a lot of people didn't like his.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it just really comes down to, the song is fine. I think if the song were on one of their later albums, like if the song ended up on Let It Be or Abbey Road, it would probably be considered like a good song and people like it, but otherwise it's a filler song.
Do you think it's a Beatles song, Jeff? You think it's a Beatles song, or is this like a weird Paul McCartney project now?
That... Are we getting into like the morality of fixing?
Yeah, now we're gonna dive into the morality of this.
Yes, I think it's a Beatles song.
You think it's a Beatles song? Okay.
I think it's a Beatles song. And because that's always hard. That's always a hard thing to do, right?
Yeah, we're doing the same thing kind of that we did with Static X, really. Like, what is this singer, like, not being able to have their input on, like, what was used mean? You know what I mean?
And I think it depends on case to case. And now, obviously, we know none of these people.
Right.
I am going to believe Paul and Ringo when they say that they think John would have loved this, right? They knew him. I am going to believe them. And I think they did his song justice. Like, it came through as a really nice song. I am assuming, at least I'm also hoping, that even John Lennon would not have come out and said, oh, I thought this was one of my best songs, because I don't think it was. I don't think it was meant to be. But I do think it is a Beatles song, but I think it's like a Beatles song with like an asterisk next to it, right? Like, I think it needs a footnote. Kind of like how, you know, there's those, what was the Queen song that they released within the past year or so?
Oh.
That was like touched up recordings. Obviously, it's still Freddie, so it's just a song that was like worked on but never actually finished.
Was that Face It Alone a couple years ago?
Yes, Face It Alone. Oh, it was like a year or two ago. Yeah. I feel like it's like that. I feel like that is absolutely a Queen song, but I think it needs a footnote. I think it needs a little one next to it with a note at the bottom of the page explaining, well, it wasn't actually finished while the band was together in that iteration.
Right.
I think this one with the Beatles is the same way. I think it absolutely qualifies as a Beatles song. It was written and performed by the Beatles with additional help. But that being said, I mean, how was that any different than the fact that the Beatles, you know, their albums were full of extra musicians, right? They had like string players and everything else going on in the background. Those are all still Beatles songs. So what difference does it make if this one was helped and edited and touched up? Like, is this, in this case, I'm going to make an argument for AI here. In this case, is this really that much different? You know, using AI to clean up this old track, is that really that much different than what anyone who does, like, music production is doing? Maybe, I don't know, maybe someone would think I'm incredibly off base here. That's the way I see it. I don't really think it's that crazy.
On top of your point, I believe that the entire last Queen album with Freddie Mercury was a product of him going into a studio and just laying down any vocal line he could think of so that they could have as much as they could use before he passed away, and then they just made an album with what he recorded. I think that's Made in Heaven.
Oh, is that really like what that is?
By the time we were recording these other tracks after Innuendo, we had discussions and we knew that we were totally on borrowed time because Freddie had been told he would not make it to that point. I think our plan was to go in there whenever Freddie felt well enough just to make as much use of him as possible. We basically lived in the studio for a while, and when he would call and say, I can come in for a few hours, our plan was just to make as much use of him as he could. He would told us, get me to sing anything, write me anything, I'll sing it, and I'll leave you as much as I possibly can.
Wow. Oh, and go figure. The song I Was Born to Love You was on that album. I love that song. I don't think I quite realized how, like, I knew the general gist was, like, it was recorded and whatnot while he, you know, knew he was going to be dying. I don't think I realized it was quite that intense of, like, oh yeah, no, like, he's on the way out, yo.
Yeah, that's a shame. But that's another one. But, our friend Bleep came up with a good point. And he said, like, the Beatles have always been about, like, pushing modern production to the limit.
Absolutely.
And trying new things with production. And to that extent, I think that AI is a fitting thing to be involved with the last Beatles song if this is truly that.
Oh yeah, they were all about experimenting and doing as much as you possibly can, right? During, like, you know, the late 60s was just like a music production revolution, and they were one of the groups absolutely spearheading that.
Yeah. And it's
so yeah,
interesting.
it seems very fitting for them to be, you know, to do this.
And it's interesting because that is one of our probably less pro AI friends, not that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's face it. This goes back to that joke of just like, you know, people who are into technology have the smart assistants in the refrigerator that connects to your Bluetooth speaker. People who work with technology keep a gun next to the printer in case it does something weird. And our buddy is a tech guy in that, like, he has worked in IT for years. This is what he does, which makes him extraordinarily skeptical of stuff like this.
No, I understand and agree, but my point was, this is a really good, I guess, point in favor of using AI to enhance something that you're creating and not necessarily create something from scratch with AI.
Yes.
I think that's the big deciding factor for me, is that I don't mind AI being used in a way that is helping you create art. It's when you're just using AI generated art.
Yeah, exactly. This is not an AI recreating John Lennon's voice. This isn't like Paul wrote a poem and then ran it through a program and said, hey, make this sound like John. Like, this was a recording of John that they used modern music production. Like, if you could honestly get away without even calling this AI. Let's be real here. That's just like the buzzword right now. They used modern computing techniques to clean up a recording.
Right.
This is no crazier than auto-tune was in the 90s. Or, you know, whatever. Like, it's a thing that just exists. No, I'm completely on board with the fact that it happened. It made a mediocre song, but I think the story of it is significantly more interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I thought you'd enjoy that documentary. I sure thought
I
it was
absolutely did. I also just like the fact that you can now stretch the Beatles' career even longer, right? You can say, like, the Beatles, who existed from 1963 to 2023, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love the fact that you can, in a way, say that. I think is so fun.
They secretly are going to have one more stashed away for when, after they're all dead, they can fuck with us one more time.
That actually would be genuinely hilarious, I'm not gonna lie. Like, if it's like in Paul's dying wish, right? Like, listen, I'll tell you where it is. Here's what I need you to do.
Oh man, he has to have someone like run a national treasure heist to get it first.
Wasn't that a thing that supposedly Prince did? Isn't that the story that, like, he died with like 30 albums worth of material recorded, but obviously none of it's ever come out, so it was all bullshit anyway?
Yeah, well...
or, quite frankly, even if it existed, it was all garbage like most of his music was?
I'll tell you what, it's actually true, but it came out under the name Tupac.
God damn it.
Alright, Jeff, take us home on the Beatles.
Take us home on the Beatles?
Take us home on the Get on the Beatles. Get in this Volkswagen Beetle. We're going home. We're gonna go home and play Beetle Adventure Racing.
Are you done? Are you gonna keep running on Beatle jokes?
No, I'm out.
Because here I was going to try and give us one last fake sponsor for the night. But you ran so hard with the Beatles that I totally lost my train of thought.
If we could get sponsored by Paul McCartney, that would be great.
That doesn't even make any sense because he doesn't sponsor things.
Well, you know, he's in that band Wings and Buffalo Wild Wings. You go get yours today.
Wow, that was the worst promotional message I've ever heard. And you'd end it right there.